everybody. Welcome to the Oxygen Addict Triathlon Podcast. I've got a super awesome show lined up for you today. I've got an interview with the one and only Cam Wurf, fresh from his 5th place finish at Kona, which was one of 2 breakthrough races he's had this year. It's really great to talk to him. He's a really great guy, really funny. I really love what he's doing with the sport and his interactions with the other athletes and at press conferences and over Twitter and Instagram. Really, really fun conversation. We talk about Kona. We talk about his race in Italy where he went 7:45, training with Chris Froome and Team Ineos, and also about his recent move to the ITU racing where a lot of people assumed he was just doing that just to try and improve his swim a little bit. But as you'll find out, there are other plans afoot for him and the Australia team. So hang out and listen to that interview a little bit later on. Going to kick off the show today with you with a couple of deals we've got going on. So discounts for you as listeners from our sponsors, Precision Hydration. They're running a special Black Friday deal. You can use the code Oxygen Friday 20. That's Oxygen Friday 20, and you'll get 20% off your entire order as long as you order before midnight on Monday, the 2nd of December. So that's running for just 1 week. So you get yourself in there. Obviously, you guys know if you've been long-term listeners, Precision Hydration have been long-term supporters of the show. If you've never tried it, you can get a free box or tube with the code Oxygen Addict. That's worth up to £9.99. And they're just awesome in terms of giving you individualized hydration needs. So in terms of electrolyte balance in your drinks, you can go anywhere from 250 milligrams of sodium through to 1500 milligrams of sodium in your bottle. If you're like me, if you're a particularly salty sweater, or if you're a very heavy sweater and you're training during the wintertime on the turbo and you're losing lots of sweat, or you're on the treadmill and you're losing lots of sweat, you need to take care of that electrolyte balance as you're training. I did an FTP session on the bike the other day, and my calves locked solid at the end of it. So I've been a naughty boy, need to get my pH in the bottles. There's no excuse for me. So get yourself sorted with that, and we've got some more deals coming up for you later on. So a couple of results then from this weekend that I've noticed. First up, and this ties in really nicely because a couple of athletes have done really well who are sponsored by Precision Hydration. First up, we had Sarah Crowley. She won the women's only pro race in Ironman Arizona. Very good performance from her, which obviously validates her for Kona for next year. She went 8:49. So a really solid performance. Looked like she had a nice margin of win, about 6 minutes over Heather Jackson, and then about another 10 back to Meredith Kessler. So she has stamped her Kona ticket for next year, and from the bits and bobs that I saw online, it looked like she was totally in control the whole day. So an awesome race for her, and great to see her in the trendy Precision Hydration hat on the podium as well. Other races that were going on, we had Ironman Cozumel down in Mexico. Now, first up, I'm going to start with the women's results here because although there was a very fast men's race, I think this result has gone a bit under the radar. Carrie Lester took the women's win here. She went 8:38. And I've been on the Tri Ratings site, Torsten's site, and looking at the fastest times of all time. She's only a few minutes outside being one of the top 5 all-time Ironman female times with that. She was like 7 minutes behind one of Chrissy Wellington's times from Roth. 45-minute swim, so part of that was a bit current assisted. It looks like it was very fast there, but she rode 4:38 on the bike and closed it with a 3:10 run. So to go 8:38, I think, I'd been dancing up and down and shouting about this from the rooftops. Really, really impressive performance from her. Again, she is another Precision Hydration sponsored athlete. So there we go. More evidence of it being used by top athletes. She took the win in front of Maja Starger Nielsen from Denmark in 8:52 and Michelle Vesterby going sub-9. So a very impressive performance from her. She's less than a year after having given birth. So another amazing performance from her. Over on the men's side, we've already said that part of the swim there, I think about a kilometre of it was current assisted. It was in the sea, but there was a bit of a tide or a current running there. So the fastest swimmers were out of the water in 39:20, which is just beyond bonkers. Tyler Butterfield ran through the field to close out with a 2:38:29 marathon, backing up a 4:19 bike to go 7:44. So again, one of the fastest Ironman times of all time, certainly into the top 10 there for him, and brilliant to see him coming through with such a strong run and closing it out. He took the win ahead of Michael Weiss and Mario de Alias of Argentina, and Tim O'Donnell. He validated his Kona slot. You've got a feel for him now. He went 8:06 and only took 7th place. Now, I know it's only a few weeks post-Kona, and I know he's just validating, but you've got to think an 8:06 deserves just a bit higher up the field than 7th. And again, we're going to hear Cam talking later on today about how he sees that the bar has just been raised, particularly over this season, and that guys are consistently winning races now in 7:45 and consistently running in the low 240s or even under 240 for the marathon, and his thoughts on some of the things that have led that to happen. So that's some results from this week. Thanks very much to our sponsors there, Precision Hydration. We're going to roll over into our interview of the week now with Cam Wurf. Okay, so Cam Wurf, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for agreeing to come back on. It's been a couple of years since we've had you on the show now, hasn't it?
Yeah, I was just actually talking to my wife about that over dinner, that I think at the time I was getting ready to go to Bustleton, which was that year was a little bit of a disaster for me. But fortunately, I don't have any races after this one, so you guys don't have a chance to be my bad luck omen this time.
Well, it looks like we've been your good luck omen, man, because there's been some really great performances going on. And it seems to me that every time I talk you down in the press, you do really, really well. And every time I say, Cam's completely blown it by having the race of his life at Italy, you then go and prove me wrong. So I'm just going to keep on saying that I don't think you're going to do well, and you'll be world champion in a few months' time, mate.
I wish I'd kept up with everyone that had said that about me, because if I'd noticed that you'd said it, I definitely would have replied to your emails differently. But no, that stuff. To be honest, I wouldn't say that I look for all that, but I do actually enjoy reading those things.
I bet, yeah.
I think, and I don't enjoy it for. I think I enjoy it because I'm so confident in our plan and strategy and what we do and the team around me. When we make a decision to do something, we go and do it for all the right reasons. And I don't never second guess that. I mean, in this sport, you can't. You're either all in or you're not, because it's become so professional. It's at such a high level now. I mean, I was just again talking to Fallon then, was about you look at the last few months, and I've gone 7:45. A week later, the German guy Florian Angart. Don't worry, I'm not disrespecting him enough to forget his name. It just escaped me for a second. Went 7:45 in Barcelona. Of course, Jan went 7:51 in Kona, and then you saw obviously Joe. Go 7:45 again last week. If you're not in those numbers, you're not even in their race anymore. You're not even a chance. You're not even a shot. 7:50 gets you second, maybe third. And so it's a sport where it's just the level has just gone up and become so professional. And if you miss a step, you have any doubts in what you're doing, then you're not going to be there. So. I enjoy, back to the point, I enjoy reading all those comments about telling us how we're doing everything wrong. Sometimes, obviously, people get it right in the case of my first ITU race, but I'll obviously do more, and we've still got a plan there, and but more often than not, we seem to show some progression, and I guess change the way people think a little bit.
Well, that's exactly it, man. And the first thing that I said at the time on the show, I said, I will eat massive amounts of humble pie if, and the race we're discussing is obviously you went to Ironman Italy, you went 7:46, you ran 2:45 off the bike 3 weeks before Kona. And at that point I thought, that is like, first up, it is the most amazing performance. Hats off to you. But I can't see you coming back and getting recovered in time to race well at Kona. And what you've proved is you're breaking the mold. There's no question that you are doing things differently to other people, and it's working for you. So absolutely hats off to you, because we've never seen somebody in the sport do things like this before and bounce back so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly, in hindsight's always a wonderful thing. At the time, the sequencing of everything that led us to that decision seemed to be really perfect, provided certain things sort of went as we hoped, which really revolved around getting to the US, getting settled, and getting back to work, and that probably didn't happen as well as we would have liked. I haven't travelled as much this year, and I probably forgot what it was like travel, especially to the other side of the world. And I'm not really a good traveller. I'm either a get there and get it done, or I need plenty of time to get settled. And the last couple of years, obviously, I've been in the US 4 to 5 weeks prior, and been quite settled in the time zone and everything, and been able to get on the start line in Kona and feel pretty sharp. This time around, it didn't happen really. I travelled, and obviously it knocked me around, as it always does. But as I said, I hadn't done it for a while, so I'd kind of forgotten about that. I didn't really get the training sessions done that I felt that I felt physically I could do, but just I didn't want to do them. I was just mentally tired and a bit drained. And then finally did get a bit done the second week after Italy, but then obviously then you're into the week before the race, so you're freshening up again. So before you know it, you've had 4 weeks where you haven't done very much. And I think that I got to Kona just feeling a little flat, and I certainly didn't have the intensity on the start line that I had, say, 12 months ago even, or that I had in Italy, that sharpness, that real freshness and aggression to get going. So Kona was more of a grind, or was not even more of, it was a grind. I didn't have the gears I normally have to be able to make the differences I need to make, particularly on the bike, and even in the swim, the way I trained to make, have a better swim. But having done Italy, I had huge confidence in my ability to run all of a sudden, and so I was able to go, right, here I am. I'm pretty confident that I know all these guys behind me are, mid 250, maybe a low 250 runner. Fortunately, I knew that even though there was a big lineup there, that none of them have ridden that quick before, so it's going to take some toll. And sure enough, towards the end of the bike where there was a bit of cross breeze, it blew apart pretty easily. I was able to get away and get a nice little gap, and obviously pass Alistair and get a good gap on him, and get myself back in a better position to start the run, and then sort of manage my effort as best I could from there. But it was probably pretty obvious to everyone I wasn't quite as flighty as I was 3 weeks before. But I certainly don't attribute that to fatigue from the race. I attribute that more just to 4 weeks of being out of a routine, and I'm definitely a creature of habit. I really need a good routine, and I think I showed that in Italy, rocking up and being able to execute. I guess in my as far as my career's gone, definitely the most flawless race that I've done so far.
Were you surprised by how well the race went in Italy? Because
for sure,
yeah,
it was exactly how I pictured it. It was exactly how I pictured it. Obviously Tim Dom was there, a very good swimmer. I'd raced him early in the year in Cannes. I knew he was a great swimmer, so I wanted to use him as a yardstick and be with him in the swim. I was able to do that, which, obviously Lucas was there, who's a phenomenal swimmer. It didn't have a huge gap on us. I was in that front group. And then I wanted to, basically get to the lead of the race, and, as I said, put my foot on their throats as quickly as possible on the bike. And I was able to do that, get a big lead early on. And, that course in Italy, it's, the second lap, it gets pretty tight on those European roads. So, I didn't want to risk and crash or anything. So I guess inadvertently I took it pretty easy on the bike in that second half, because I just was, it was people everywhere. So I didn't want to run into anyone. And I wasn't in the mood of yelling and abusing people. I don't do that. We do this sport, and we're out there with everyone, and we're just one of the other. We're just a fellow competitor. There's nothing special about us. So it's not my road to tell people to get out of the way. And and then obviously on the run, my goal was to do a reasonably good even split run, which I'd not been able to do. I'd certainly gone through halfway in low 120s quite a few times and never broken 250. So the plan was to be able to just evenly split the run, so go out a bit easier. And the theory was, heading into Kona, that the less kilometres I'm hurting on the run, the quicker I'll recover. So if I went out too hard and I was suffering after 5K, well, I was going to hurt for 30K, 35K, and then I'd be very fatigued. So if we could push that back to the last 10K, or in this case, really, it wasn't until the last 5K where I started to feel a little bit of fatigue, that's not very long to suffer. And so at that point, I was able to sort of back it off and, make sure I looked after my body as best I could and finish the race feeling as the best I could. And yeah, it was crazy. That first lap I did go easy and they took some time out of me. I said, that's fine. I'll do another lap like that and see where we're at. Sure enough, the next lap I'd taken the time back and then I thought, oh, that's good. And then the next lap, the gap went up and then up. But it wasn't through me applying pressure or anything. It was more me just executing a plan we had. And I was as surprised as anyone when I ran down that red carpet and saw the clock. I knew I was running pretty well. I'd checked the clock at around halfway, as I always do, and again at 30K, and I knew I was around a 2:44, because at that point I thought, oh, do I go for it? Do I go and try and break it, 2:40 at halfway? But I thought, no, don't be stupid. Kona's in 3 weeks. That's not what you're here to do. And so I knew I was going pretty well there, but I sort of hadn't put all the pieces of the puzzle together for the rest of the event. And I don't know if anyone watched, but we had the transition there was like 600 meters long. I measured it.
Really?
It was, yeah. And, on barefoot, that was the biggest thing, that fatigue I had after that race was my feet were so sore because I ran 1.2K pretty much flat out, in and out of transition on concrete.
Yeah.
And like the soles of my feet were just sore, and so that was, that's another 3 or 4 minutes on top of the time than what you get at a normal race. So, so I was quite shocked how quick it was.
I'm really intrigued by this because obviously we saw you put this 2:45 up there, and that is a scorching fast run split by anybody's standards. To hear you say you think you could have gone 5 minutes faster because you were kind of dialing it back at the end, if I was to push you, how fast do you think you could go on the perfect day? And I know it's like a random question, but how fast do you think you could go? You think you could run under 2:40 for the marathon?
Yeah, I do. Then I remember that day I went through, it was around 122, 120, high 21, and I was like, right, to keep this up and I'm going to run a 2:45, and then I had 2:44, and then I obviously had at the end a little bit left there in that last 5-10K where I was able to back it off even more, but still run a 2:45. But at halfway, I was very comfortable, and I definitely felt like I could have ramped it up and gone for it for sure. It just would have taken, a fair amount of effort. But no, I definitely feel that that's well within my wheelhouse now for sure.
Wow. Now, one thing I've always wondered about is so many of you guys, your focus for the year is going to Kona and winning at Kona. And in a way, it's a real shame that there isn't a race where, you've got those guys you've just mentioned, you've got Jan, you've got Joe Skipper, you've got Ben Hoffman's performance in Florida was amazing as well. If you guys all went to a course that was a fast course and you got good conditions and you got to race each other head to head, what do you think would be ultimately possible?
Oh, for sure. Obviously Jan's time in Roth, but then again, we know Roth is, it's a bit of a shorter course, and Jan also, when he did that, the course was different to what it is now. They changed the run course after that. It was the run that the year he did it. It was dead flat, the run, all up and down the canal. And then the next year it was changed. It was quite a lot harder. Bart Arno couldn't even break 8 hours the following year.
Yeah.
And so they changed it again to make it, somewhere halfway. And Sebi's now gone, I think he did 7:46, 7:47 there. So it's still a quick course, but the problem is at the moment, it's like we saw with Texas the other year, it's the conjecture of, the course and rate and so forth and so forth. It would just be great if they could, legitimately measure the exact length of the course. I think a river obviously is important because you're not dealing with tides for a swim.
Yeah.
So that the swim's the right distance. Surely it can't be too hard to measure 180K on a bike ride and then obviously measure out a marathon and, do it somewhere in favourable conditions, obviously nice and cool and not too humid. And I wouldn't be surprised to see someone go very close to Yarn's 7:35, I think it is, or more or less.
I think so, yeah.
Even somewhere between there and 7:30, or potentially breaking 7:30. I think that's that's a 4-hour bike ride and a 250 run. And a 50-minute swim. Something like that. So
it feels like the next barrier, doesn't it? It feels like, and I want to come on to asking you about what do you think has made progression happen in the last couple of years so quickly, but it seems that only a few years ago guys going under 8 hours was pretty rare, and now guys are going 7:45. 3 or 4 of you in the space of a couple of months. And just as you've said, if you want to be winning races now, I mean, we saw poor Ben Hoffman turn himself inside out to run, was it 2:37? 2:36.
No, 2:36.
Yeah. To run down Joe and still not get the win. And so the standard of...
Well, not even get close.
No.
Really.
Yeah.
He was still a few minutes back. So
that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think has made the difference over the last few years then with, this big jump of 15 or 20 minutes to get you guys all of you getting so much faster?
Well, this is a tricky one. I'm not wanting to pat myself on the back, but I mean, it's pretty hard to not think that it's probably me. I mean, I've come into the sport, I've ridden, because you got to remember, no one's swimming or running any quicker. I'm running quicker. But Joe's run a 2:30 in Roth before, 2:38, 2:39, even maybe quicker. Ben Hoffman's run fast before, Matt Hansen's run fast. Yarn's run 2:39. The only thing that's changed is the speed of the bike, which is what I changed, and not what I guess that's not entirely right. Obviously Starkowitz has ridden quickly as well, but no one has really ever taken much notice of that or really cares, because it's obvious that he's not really showing a huge amount of regard for the race. He has a bit of a thing about proving that he's the best cyclist for whatever reason. I've obviously, and I think as much as people hate to admit it, have come in and shown that I'm trying to win the race, and I just happen to be a good cyclist and have learnt to ride that quick and then get off and run. And I think also in the past couple of years, people like Joe, even people like Yarn now in Kona. I mean, you've got to remember Yarn went, 15 minutes quicker than he's ever gone in Kona before? Yeah. They've looked and gone, right, so we can ride hard and run hard. Again, I'm not wanting to sound like a dick, but the reality is the only one that's done anything different in the last few years in the sport has been myself. So that's great. I mean, that's what you want. When I started it, one of the reasons I started it was I didn't, and the guys from Team Sky, we didn't feel that the sport was at its potential, where it was headed to. We felt like the times that we're doing now were very achievable. And that was with me, who was very new to the sport. So I think that it's great that all the other athletes in the sport that had all been around for a very long time already have seen that and just all of a sudden, flick the switch, change their psyche a bit and realise, wait a minute, no, we've got to ride hard and then run quick as well. We can't get off, and it's not an excuse to ride hard and then fade in the run. No, you've got to be good enough to ride basically as hard as you can and then get off and run well. And that's, I guess, almost taking an ITU approach to an Ironman. And it's bloody exciting.
Yeah,
so, I don't know if you see it that way, but that's how I see it.
Well, from our point of view, it is more exciting because it looks like guys are... I mean, we watched Kona this year and people were just popping left, right and centre. I sat and watched all of the Kona coverage from start to finish, which, I mean, I'm a bit of an anorak with these things anyway, I guess you could argue.
Yeah.
But I was watching and watching the stress on... there was this film with the front group and you've got Tim going to the front to put the pressure on Jan and then kind of shaking his head at Ali Brownlee to come through. It looked like the guys were working each other the whole time. And then it would go back to you on the road and the guys with you. And I was sitting there trying to analyze it thinking, I don't think that anyone's making any ground up. And obviously, the context here is you've said you weren't on a good day, but it looked like everybody was on a good day on the rivet and no one was making any ground up on anybody else.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, hey, when I say that, I still was fit and strong and able to do a decent, a solid performance. But, I guess it's pretty obvious, the past couple of years I've been able to do these maneuvers during the race, which has sort of made a difference. And I didn't have I just didn't have the sharpness to do that this time around. And and also I've got a bit more to lose now. I feel like in the past years I had, nothing to lose because there was nothing expected of me. Now, I've obviously I performed pretty well. I mean, this year I've won half the races that I've turned up to, and
Yeah.
got third in another one and fifth in another one, which are the two biggest ones in the sport. It's not really acceptable for me to go for broke and blow to pieces. So I had to be a little bit careful with how I spent my energy, making sure that I did a good overall race and still got a good result and learned as much as I possibly could, for the future. And that was why I, sort of, I guess, was a little bit more subdued than I normally would be on the bike. And, things panned out the way they did.
We have to give you the credit here, though. I mean, you're a very humble guy. You're saying you had a flat day. You still rode 4:14 and ran 2:55 off the bike in Kona for an 8:06 finish, which is one of the top 10 fastest times of all time. Still.
Yeah, but I guess what was interesting was, Sebi obviously was able to run past me from that group, and I guess Ben came from the clouds and got me in that last bit, but. I actually don't know everyone that was in that group. I knew Boris Stein was there because that dimwit came past twice, and he'd sort of sprint to come past, ride hard for about 20 seconds, and then start stretching his back and slow down. And I went past him when he did it the second time, and I said, "Dude, what are you doing?" He said, "Oh, I'm just playing." And I said, "Well, mate, it's a race. We're racing, so go back down the back and do your play and do your stretching. I don't need to see it up here because I'm trying to get back to the front, And But obviously, I knew Sebi was there, and I couldn't see Line. I didn't know Joe was there. I had no idea after Sebi, and as I said, Boris. But I did know that there was bound to be a lot of good runners in there, and so that I knew that I had to keep the pressure on the whole way because I knew that they would back themselves to outrun me, particularly if they were getting any sort of assistance by sitting behind me. So I had to make sure that there was no dull moments. In the pace. And, in the end, I was able to outrun, apart from Sebi and, of course, Ben, there was 10 or 12 guys there. I was able to outrun the rest of them. Well, obviously, Boris has pulled out because he'd obviously killed himself to even stay with us. So, but the rest of them, even, obviously, Joe, Phil Courtney, the guys, even Bart, not sure where he was on the bike, but Braden was obviously back a bit. He ran into the top 10, but that was pretty. That made me feel really good being able to do that. I'll tell you that. I mean, I felt very pleased with my progression for the year to have the confidence to get off and know that all those guys are behind me, thinking that they can catch me, and I was able to dial up a pretty consistent pace like I did in Italy, and of course I had a bit of a fade, but not super big in that second half, but with the energy lab you always tend to anyway, and run what I felt was the best I could run on the day.
Yeah, I mean it was a very, very solid performance, and you must have. How did it feel? When Lionel came by you and Ali came by you, and then you came by them again later on. That must give you tremendous confidence in your running going forwards as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, Sebi passed me with Lionel. Oh, first Alistair passed me, and the way he passed me, I mean, I knew I wasn't running slow. I know that I don't run slow anymore. So the speed at which he passed me, I knew that he was going to pay for that. So I didn't worry too much about that. I was confident I'd see him again. And then Sebi came past, who looked great, and I wasn't so confident that I could catch him. And Lionel was right behind him, who looked terrible. And so I was confident that, again, that I'd be able to see him. But certainly when they passed me, that was when I started to sort of increase my effort a bit to try and keep myself in the race. So it wasn't that long later, actually, that I passed Lionel. He was sort of the first one to suffer. And then and then I knew I was closing on Alistair. I could, once you get out there in the Queen K, you can see. So went past him, and at the time, I can tell you what, I mean, if it had been me like the year before, I probably would have done a dance and been pretty bloody excited and thought, wow, this is incredible that I'm passing Alistair Brownlee. Someone who I couldn't have more respect for anyone, than that guy with what he's achieved. I mean, he's just, it's just phenomenal, and having now done an ITU race, knowing what he's been able to do there, just blows my mind. I just, I mean, he deserves every accolade and whatever he ever gets in the world of sport in general. But he was just another opponent, and at that point it was okay, great. Now I'm in fourth, and my wife, I guess my father-in-law, he's pretty good at predicting where I should finish, and he said top 5, and I certainly was doing everything I could. I was calculating. I'd seen Jan obviously on Ali Drive, and was confident he wasn't coming back. Tio and Sebi, I had to rely on basically them blowing up. So really, I was racing for fourth. Was what I could control, and I sort of knew Ben was there, but it wasn't really till the Energy Lab that I really knew that he was going to catch me. So passing Ali was more of an insurance blanket. I had one spot to drop back from what my reformed objective for the day was, and but I got a mate of mine who actually filmed it. I didn't even realise. Sent me a little footage of it yesterday, and actually put it up on Instagram.
I saw that
running just past him.
Yeah,
and I was like, wow, that's pretty amazing, because I actually look like I know what I'm doing. So that was a pretty cool thing to even be on the same race course as that guy, let alone be duking it out with him on the Queen K. Not that, fortunately, not that on this occasion he put up much of a fight. He let me go pretty quickly.
Now, you mentioned a little while ago training with Team Sky and how you guys had looked at Ironman and thought, you know what, there's more here from a performance point of view. At Ironman, we can raise the level and raise the game. And I've always wondered, I've heard you talk about training with the guys from Team Sky and training with Geraint Thomas and training with Chris Froome. What's the deal that you have there? Are you employed by them as a team member, but to train for triathlon, or how does that all work?
No. Well, I mean, I guess in theory, they're representative from the team that organises everything for the team regarding sponsorships, does everything for me. So everything is, 100% in line. But no, I'm not actually part of the roster or anything yet. Yeah, they organise everything for me and are there as a support and resource for me for whatever it is I need. And obviously I'm welcome at training camps and everything whenever that suits both of us. Obviously if they're getting ready for the Tour de France or whatever, well, I guess I have been there prior to that, but if there's 15 guys and they're trying to pick 9, there's not really the need for an extra triathlete that can annoy people by talking too much. So but yeah, as a general rule, I mean, they basically just call me the 31st rider because they've had a full roster the last couple of years. But we have talked about racing over the past couple of years, but it just doesn't make any sense at the moment. Last year I've needed to focus on the running, and if I'd gone and done a bike race and crashed, I don't have the luxury of being able to take 3 or 4 weeks off, and recover. And I mean, that would really be a big setback. So, and same really now, I mean, the swimming obviously has to become a major focus for the next, 12 months. And again, you can't just sort of slip over and graze your ankle or graze your elbow or, graze your shoulder or break your collarbone and be out of the water for 4 weeks. I mean, that would be a huge setback. It just hasn't really worked out that way. So it's turned into, I'm just, able to be a part of the team but not race, I guess. So it's really a dream situation for me. But it's a relationship that started back when I was racing. We looked at me going there a couple of times and couple of times when I wanted to go there, they didn't want me, and then other times when they did want me, I already had a contract. So it was it's sort of been an ongoing thing for years. And Tim Kerrison, of course, the year that I won the Under-23 World Championships, he actually coached the guy that I ended up that also won the Under-23 World Championships in a different crew. He coached and then I ended up with George in the Olympic boat the following year. So Tim was very close to being our Olympic coach. Unfortunately, we missed out on that because they kept it in the institute program, and he was more of a private coach and at the time, and he was working out of a university boat club, and and that was when he went to swimming. So he was pretty disappointed he didn't get that job, and which he didn't tell me until recently. And it's pretty crazy how how things pan out. That was 16 years ago.
Yeah.
So, and then he went to swimming, and they obviously he did that with the Australian team for Beijing, or for Athens, and then went to British swimming for Beijing, and then of course they started Team Sky. So who knows? Maybe if he hadn't got the job coaching us at the Olympics, he might have never ever ended up coaching at Team Sky. So it's funny how how the circle of sporting life evolves. Yeah.
Well, here's a question then. Do you think had he ended up as your Olympic coach when you were in the boat, could you have been Olympic champion at rowing? Because he's obviously doing something right with you as coach, isn't he?
Yeah, I would have been very surprised had we not have been a contender. Yeah, I mean, we definitely had the capacity and the ability, George and I, as a combination, we're very young, but we were very good at that age. And Tim was obviously a phenomenal coach, as he's proven in anything. And but he just knows how to get the most out of the right people. I mean, he'd be the first to admit that his philosophy and training methodology doesn't work for everyone, but the ones that it does work for, it obviously has. Yeah, it obviously really works.
It's obviously really working for you, isn't it?
Yeah, and George and I are two people that obviously it probably would have worked very well for. So anyway, that is what it is, and we're here now, and I mean, I guess I should just be grateful that I even went to the Olympics. So
yeah, right.
Especially now. At the time, you get annoyed and disappointed you miss an opportunity to win an Olympic medal, but now, all these years later, it's like, well, gosh, I'm really glad I even got there. So, yeah.
What is it about Tim's coaching that gets the best out of you?
My whole sporting career until I met Tim, all the coaches I've had have always have been very good, yet they've always been concerned that I'm training too hard and not racing. Well, no, I won't say it that way. I don't race. I haven't performed in races to the level of my training. And the coaches I've had have all scratched their head because they're like, gosh, I mean, I was able to, when I was with Liquid Gas, I could break Ivan Basso's climbing records all around Varese where we lived, in training, yet in the race, I was in a different zip code.
Okay.
Same with even rowing. I was one of the best in the world on the rowing machine, yet, I've only got one Under-23 world title to my name and a fourth at elite level. And then, so I guess all the coaches were, you're training too hard, you don't rest enough, and then you do another great block of preparation and then you'd underperform at the race, and then that would be the takeaway. Oh, he just trains too hard, he wastes his energy in training. I never hear that from Tim. It's he's always trying to figure out how much he can make us do. And from the first trainings, this all started from a random phone call back at the beginning of 2017 in January. And Chris was in Australia training, and he was at Tim's house up on the Gold Coast in Mount Tambourine. And one of the guys who he'd had out there training, Kenny Lasson, the little French guy, he got called in to race Tour Down Under last minute because one of the riders got sick or crashed. And so Chris was alone. And Tim obviously knows me very well, or we've kept in touch over the years. Knew I was in Australia because he'd run into Richie Port down at Tour Down Under when he was there. He just popped down for a day. And he thought, oh, you know what? Cameron might be a great training partner for Chris if he's even... At that point, Tim didn't really know if I was even exercising, but Richie had told him that I was still pretty strong on the bike and so forth. So he calls me, late one night, and it's the first time I'd ever got a phone call on WhatsApp. I didn't even know that WhatsApp had that function. I was looking at my phone thinking, what is this thing doing? And it was Tim, and said, can you come up? And I said, absolutely, I'll be there tomorrow. And there I was. I rocked up the next morning, got on the plane from Tassie, went up to the Gold Coast. The first day of training, because at this point I'd done a couple of triathlons, but more as, I was more killing time. I was wanting to work in finance and go and do that. I was sort of pretty much at a point where I'd given up on sport. When I stopped cycling, that was my goal. I wanted to go to finance and work on Wall Street. And it was just, I ended up sort of kept getting dragged into the sport, into doing triathlons inadvertently through different friends and so forth. And, and anyway, the first day I rock up there and Tim said, okay, we just did a 5-hour ride, nothing too crazy. And then finished at this national park, and he said, bring your running shoes, both of you. We're going to do a run. Anyway, we ended up running. Froome as well. Tim, Froome, and I, we did a half marathon off the bike. So
really?
That was day one of all this. Froome could barely walk for the next week, and I don't know if it was Tim's way of softening him up so I wouldn't get dropped in training so much. But for the next 10 days, we basically did everything pretty much side by side, or as Tim would call it, Ironman rules, 12 metres apart, because I just sort of stayed behind Chris and was meant to do what he did. And, he wasn't able to drop me, and I was able to hold my own. And Tim said, well, what do you want to do? You've obviously still got something. And that's when I said, well, you know what? This Ironman stuff interests me. And he said, well, how about we give it a go? And here we are. So, yeah, quite a turn of events, really.
It really, yeah. It's quite amazing to think that, I mean, obviously there's a huge budget at the cycling team and all of that, but it amazes me that he's got the flexibility to kind of go, well, do you know what? We're now going to branch out into Ironman, and I found the perfect $1 million man to, to put it together with. That's great, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess it's also, because I've been conscious of that, not wanting to be the reason why, something doesn't go right at the tour or whatever. I'm as nervous as everyone, especially when I remember particularly training with Chris prior to the Vuelta in 2017, and that was when everything really turned around for me. The start of that year, the first year the goal was to get to Kona, and we didn't know how hard that would be with the ranking points. So it felt a bit like what I'm trying to do with the Olympic stuff, although that might be even another step further. I didn't start my first race as a pro until South Africa, which was April. So I was a long way behind the 8 ball. And by the time we got to July, I still needed, basically we'd run out of races. There was one left, which was Sweden. And I needed second, probably third would have done it too, but second to get the last spot, in the rankings. Like we knew that I was safe. Thorsten Rad, became friends with him, and he kept updating me on what I needed. And,
legend.
Anyway, and so I'd done the Ironman in Switzerland and didn't go very well. I came 7th. And Chris had just finished the tour, obviously, which he won. And he called me and he said, I need to train for the Vuelta. I'm going to a camp in Chatel. Could you come? And I said, why not? So basically I went straight from Zurich to Chatel, and we had 2 weeks. And that was, he was just so strong after the tour, and he was just at a completely different level to obviously what he'd been in January. And I was just suffering all of a sudden. Now he was dropping me instantly. I wasn't even in the same. You wouldn't have thought we were training together, that's for sure, anyone that came past. And so went from there, and I remember the last day of sort of the camp before I sort of went off and got ready for the Ironman. He just said, "Look, mate, like just go and do what you know you can do. You don't have to try and do any more than that." And anyway, I went to Sweden and had an okay swim, had a great bike ride, obviously as you should after training with Froome for a couple of weeks, and then ran a 3:02 marathon, came second easily, and all of a sudden I made it to Kona. And we'd already planned, obviously, on not going to Kona because I'd entered Wales. And Tim said, well, you're only just starting to figure it out. You may as well go to Wales and see if you can win. And so, sure enough, 3 weeks later, I went and won Wales and then went to Kona for the first time. So, yeah, it was a pretty incredible first year. And then, of course, Chris went to the Vuelta and just dominated. I mean, that was one of his strongest performances, that he's had. So, yeah, it's Tim. I think back to the team side of it. I've spoken to staff and even senior management about that exact thing, and they say it's great for Tim because he needs different stimulus. And recently he was heavily involved with the breaking two. Well, he was mission controller. He was the one with the biggest headset on in the mission control room with Kipchoge breaking 2 hours, and he really thrives on those sort of challenges and activities, and it keeps him.
You're keeping him busy, huh?
I guess keeps him fresh. Yeah, I mean, he's
That's
always
great.
We're never doing the same thing. We're always evolving. Training's always evolving. Diets are always evolving. Sleeping, the way we do camps, everything is always an evolution in this team, and I guess that's what keeps them in front. So, and why when guys from the team go to another team, they're probably scratching their head because they're not going as well anymore, and it's guys leaving them behind because they're on to the next thing. So, it's a pretty amazing organisation, that's for sure.
Yeah. Hey, now is it true in 2017 you went to Kona? You broke the bike course record there, the long-standing bike course record of Norman Stadler. Is it true that you met him out on the run course?
Yeah, just at the top of Palani Hill. He was there and he said, "You broke my record." I said, "Mate, I'm never going to be the true record holder until I can win the race as well, and I'm not doing that today." So, I mean, that's still true. I mean, yeah, it's great having the bike course record, but it means nothing to me. What I'm trying to win is the race, and even the times I've put up. I mean, particularly last year was, more of I was trying to put myself in a position to win. And I guess with the conditions, without, the last few years really with the conditions, it hasn't been as treacherous as it can be, and that probably hasn't helped my cause at all. That was cool, and it was interesting to see Norman how how important that was to him, or how much of a thing that was to him, which, maybe I should appreciate those small things more. But I guess at the moment I'm still fixated on trying to reach the top of the tree. So, yeah.
Well, it's obvious from listening to you, you're an incredibly driven guy. You really love to train, which you've got to be if you're going to do well at this sport. But what is it do you think drives you? What's at the heart of that drive to keep on training and keep on getting better?
I think you nailed it in that I love exercising. I just love training. I mean, even when I was back in my rowing days, I remember dreaming that one day I could be a professional athlete. I've never liked being pigeonholed as anything, but I've always wanted to be a professional athlete so I could spend all day eating, sleeping, breathing sport. Training, recovering, watching it. I just genuinely am a huge fan of anything sport, and of course doing it as well. And so I've always, I guess the underlying thing is I've always wanted to win one of those big things, like win one of the great sporting events. And in the sports I'm interested in or been any good at, there's really only obviously the Olympics, there's the Tour de France and Kona. I mean, Kona is something I've watched since I was 7 years old. I mean, Greg Welsh, back in, was it 89, 6 years, when he was second or third the first time, and then obviously following him through all the heartaches and things going wrong until 94 when he finally won. I mean, Australia was hooked on that. I mean, I've known about Ironman, and even I was talking to my mum the other day after Santo Domingo, and how that went, and she's said, so what are you thinking? And I told her what I was thinking, and said, obviously I'm not going to put Kona in jeopardy by chasing something that's not possible, but I obviously want to still see it through until it's obvious that I can't do it. And she just said that don't forget how long Kona's been in that little mind of yours, and she, because from 6 years old, I was in front of the TV watching it, and I guess I see this as my chance,
Yeah.
I'm getting closer, and and I am just so intrigued and excited every day when I get up to train, because we're always pushing the boundary to see if I can get through it or not, and I'm as excited as, I'm excited to see if I can get through it. I'm excited to see what's going to happen, which is a mindset I never really had ever before. I mean, when Tim asked me to do this and that, I'm like, holy mac, on paper that just seems insane, yet, and I can't wait to see what happens that day, and often I can't wait to get up in the morning to go and try what he's telling me to do. I just love it.
That's so great.
Absolutely love exercising.
Hey, right, one last question before we finish up then. Let's talk about this recent move to the ITU, the World Cup race in Santa, I'm going to pronounce it incorrectly, Santo Domingo, is that correct? Domingo,
yeah, you're
Domingo. Close enough, yeah. I'm renowned for getting the names of things wrong, mate, I tell you.
Yeah, that's all right.
So what's driven this decision to go and race short course, and tell us about your experience there?
Yeah, well, I guess firstly, watching the Brownleys and the way they've executed the past couple of games with having a bit of support there, and seeing how well that's worked, and then watching Jake and the way he's been very good, yet then but potentially not had some near misses where you look at it and think maybe it would have been great if he'd had some support. So that in the first instance is what got my attention, and then of course now the glaring reality that the swim is becoming so important in Ironman, which it wasn't so much before.
Yeah.
And I'm one of the few probably that, because I've been doing it for such a short period of time, that can probably improve a significant amount by doing some specific training, which I've never done in swimming. So, the ITU carrot is sort of a bit of a two-pronged thing. One, if I'm capable of getting the World Cup points to be eligible to be selected, and the Australian team see it fit that I could potentially be there of some support to Jake, then fantastic. Worst case scenario, which is probably what it looks more likely at the moment after my first performance, is I'm going to work my ass off to improve my swim, and going and racing these kids and getting your ass kicked is certainly going to keep that fire burning, because I hate that. I don't like getting beaten, especially being humiliated. And it's a great just impetus to make me make that change. Certainly no focus on the run aspect of it, because if you look at the ITU guys that have done Ironman, one thing they all do great is swim. They're always at the front in the swim. They're at the front on the bike. But then the greatest of them, well, obviously apart from Jan, but it's taken him quite a number of years, and I believe he was a bit different athlete in the ITU days with the way he trained compared to the rest. Gomez and now Alistair, obviously that running doesn't really help you when it comes to an Ironman. So, they're going to have to, adapt to that. So it would be silly to be running around trying to run a 14-minute 5K, which obviously is probably something I could never do anyway. But, we're not going to, focus too heavily on that. But
how much do you think you need to raise your swim by?
A lot, yeah.
Yeah?
A lot. Although it's hard to quantify, because the other day I was in touch to the first boy, and I wasn't last in that group. I was actually sort of, I guess, the back third. But when we turned the buoy and sort of everyone kind of changed directions, I had a few moments where I lost the feet, so then got punched off the feet, then tried to get back on the feet, then got sort of bounced into clear water. And then once I was in my own water, I lost a metre, and then that was it. They were gone.
Yeah.
So, it is very difficult. And never knowing that intensity of having been in that intensity, normally after 400 metres, you've made it. It settles down in what I've done in Ironman. But in this, they just keep going, even keep going quicker. So just now having some experience with how it works. But, I guess obviously the easiest thing would have been to just pull out, but to be honest, I'm never going to pull out because I'm getting my ass kicked. That's not very
good
honourable.
for you, mate. Yeah.
So I just did everything I could in the race to stay in the race. I was calculating so Matt McElroy wouldn't lap me, so they wouldn't pull me off the course. So, that to me felt like a huge success. And and had a great meeting with the selectors this morning, and we talked about it. And obviously one of the potential outcomes of the conversation was let's give it up. But no one really wanted that to happen, me included, them included, and we've got a plan to. There'll be some. Now everything's make or break. There'll be some set things in training that benchmarks that I'll have to meet in my swimming between now and South Africa. If I can meet them, they'll let me race South Africa, and then after that we'll make another call whether I get another start.
How exciting!
It's obviously entirely in their field now, because they're the ones that have to enter me. I can't do that myself, and go from there. But I'm still 100% committed. I'm not afraid of failing, and at the end of the day, I think in the long run, and that was also a big part of the conversation, the focus on the swimming will really help me in Kona come October.
Awesome. Hey, well, listen, we wish you all the best. I've got nothing but respect for your continual quest for improvement, but also your love of training.
Keep tapping on me. I appreciate that.
I owe you all of this just by writing you off after Italy, so I owe you big time, man. Well, listen, thanks so much for taking the time to come on the show, mate. I really look forward to watching your progress over the next year.
Absolute pleasure. Anytime.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed the interview. I really enjoyed talking with Cam. I think he's a great character, and I'm really interested to see how this possible plan to go to the Olympics and work alongside or work for Jake Birtwistle works out. So we'll see how Cam's swimming improves over the winter time. All right, we're going to move into Coach's Couch here. Coach's Couch is sponsored by Thriver. Thriver do personalised at-home finger prick blood tests, and you can get yourself £30 off your first test with the code OxygenAddict30. These things are great for athletes. They can test your iron, your testosterone, your liver function, vitamin B9 and B12, vitamin D, or if you're interested in health tracking, they can track things like thyroid function, diabetes, cholesterol, omega-3 and omega-6, all the different levels that you could have done in the blood test that you would have done at the GPs. You can do at home. It takes less than 10 minutes to do, from opening the packet to getting it sealed back up to take to the post office. It's sent to an NHS qualified lab. You get your results analysed and fed back to you by a GP, a British GP, and you get the results within 48 hours. So it's been really interesting for me to track this. A lot of you know I've been feeling really rotten, or was feeling really rotten earlier on in this year. So having the Thriver blood tests available has meant that I can do these tests 3 or 4 times this year and try and take care of the things I was really struggling with, such as the low B12, the low vitamin D, the testosterone levels. All of that stuff is kind of on an upward trend, it looks like to me. And coming up in a few weeks' time, I'm going to do a special on there's a really good doctor that I've met who's done some analysis of the blood tests outside even of what Thriver offer, and can offer some really good advice to all of us around basically things we can do to improve our overall health and wellness that underlie our ability to perform as athletes. So talking about nutrition, talking about food, talking about all the kind of things that we can do to support our bodies being healthy before we even look at things we can do to perform. So that special is going to be coming up in a couple of weeks' time. So I'm really quite excited for you guys to hear how he analyzes the blood tests I had done all the way back in April and May, and the lessons that we've learned along the way, what changes I've need to make. Because he's got some very interesting guidelines to say for all of us, some really simple stuff we can do, and cut through all the jargon and just do stuff that's really going to help us out on top of just the training that we do. Okay, so Coach's Couch this week, there's a question came through in our Oxygen Addict Triathlon community group from David Murray, who says, I'm looking for some help. I've started doing the 8-week FTP bike builder program. I haven't got a power meter, so I'm just using heart rate. And he's basically looking for some advice here because there's quite a bit of confusion around how to do an FTP test and how to do interval training when you're just using heart rate and you haven't got a power meter. So David says, I've heard that you do the 20-minute test and you take 95% of the result. Well, that's correct, David, if you're using a power meter. However, if you're just training with a heart rate meter, or a heart rate measurement, that's not going to work for you. You can't take 95% of the value of the 20-minute test that you've done. So what I advise athletes to do here, then this is just in the case of just using heart rate. The first thing I would say to everybody is if you possibly can do your FTP test on a bike with a power meter, do it. If you can't, I advise you to do something like Zwift or a smart trainer that's got virtual power. So again, with most trainers, you can do the virtual power or Z power, it's called on Zwift. It'll be much more accurate than just using heart rate alone. If you haven't got those two options available to you, or you don't want to try Zwift, you can use a watt bike. And again, there you get measurements of power, and then you can go and train on the watt bike. And again, it's access to power. Most gyms have got watt bikes in these days. I think all of these options during the winter are better than just training with heart rate. However, if you are just going to use heart rate, here's what I would advise. If you're still going to do the 20-minute test, what you have to be aware of is the 20-minute test is essentially a shortened version, and the most accurate way to work out your functional threshold power or heart rate is to do a 60-minute test. And what you'll see happen is if you pace it well and it's even power, even heart rate, your heart rate usually rises over the first 3 or 4 minutes or so, and then it plateaus out. Power will stay level throughout the whole test in a good test. So you could just take your power from that entire 60 minutes. That'd be your functional threshold power. But what we used to advise was taking the last 40 minutes of the 60-minute hour as your, the bit where the heart rate levels out and goes flat. That would be your functional threshold heart rate. If you're only doing a 20-minute test, and let's be honest, most people don't want to do a 60-minute test because it's so utterly painful and unpleasant. It's all right doing it in a time trial in the summer, but if you just do the 20-minute test, you do your warm up, you do some hard efforts, and then you take 5 minutes or so to ride really, really easy, and your heart rate's going to drop back down again. From the minute you hit go on the 20 minutes, take the average heart rate all the way over the 20 minutes. So it's going to rise from, not quite a resting level, but up to the level where it levels out. And from my experience, that ends up being there or thereabouts. The average over the 20 minutes, including the first few minutes where your heart rate is rising to the bit where it plateaus out, that's going to be about the same as the reading you'd get from doing it for an hour, because obviously you can hold a slightly higher heart rate for 20 minutes than you could do for the 60 minutes. So take your average heart rate over that entire 20-minute chunk. That's then going to be the heart rate that you're going to use to do your intervals too. Now, the challenge with doing intervals with just heart rate is that, as I said, it's going to take 2, 3, 4 minutes for it to get to its level each time. So you end up with a heart rate trace that looks a bit like an increasing sawtooth. It gets a bit higher each time over the first, say you were doing 6 reps of 5 minutes. Over the first 3 or 4, it's going to go up a bit and then level out, drop down, then recovery. Go up a bit higher and then drop down. Go up a bit higher again and then drop down. It's only going to be about halfway through that 30-minute interval session, it starts actually reaching your true functional threshold heart rate. So the point with heart rate not being very accurate is if you banged straight to try to reach a functional threshold heart rate, you'd be putting out much, much more power and going too hard. So if you possibly can, Dave, get yourself to a point where you can use either virtual power or a watt bike, or even save up and get yourself a power meter. And that'll be much, much more accurate as a way to measure it all for you. Okay, guys, thanks very much for listening. I've got some great news for next week. Next week's edition, I've got an interview for you with Lucy Charles Barkley, fresh from finishing second at Kona again. So I just got it in the can yesterday. A really fun chat with her. So I'm really looking forward to bringing that to you. So tune in next week. So before we wrap this up, thanks again to our sponsors. Precision Hydration. Remember, they've got a Black Friday sale on. So if you use the code I've lost it here. Oxygen Friday 20. You'll get 20% off your entire order as long as you order before Monday, the 2nd of December. Thanks to our sponsors, Thriver.co. You can get £30 off your first test with the code OxygenAddict30. And remember, if you're looking for triathlon coaching, you can get in touch with me via the website teamoxygenaddict.com or help@oxygenaddict.com. Just drop me a line and we'll see what we can work out there for you. And remember, there's links to all of this stuff in the show notes for the sponsors, so you don't have to remember all of this stuff. So until next week, everyone, thanks very much. Have a great, safe training and racing week. I'm Coach Rob Wilby, and you've been listening to the Oxygen Addict Triathlon Podcast. See ya.